The wind screamed through the frozen darkness like 1,000 voices crying in agony. Somewhere along Highway 47, buried beneath a wall of white fury, a woman held two small children against her chest and whispered the only prayer she remembered from childhood. Her lips were blue. Her fingers had stopped hurting 20 minutes ago, and that terrified her more than the storm itself. The 3-year-old boy had stopped shivering, and the 5-year-old girl kept asking why they couldn't go back to the car. But the car was dead. The heater had failed, and staying there meant dying there. Her name was Emma Dawson. She was 24 years old, and tonight, in the middle of the worst blizzard to hit northern Montana in 40 years, she was about to make a choice that would change everything. What Emma didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have known, was that 3 miles away, a man and his German shepherd were already searching for her. Not because they knew who she was, not because anyone had called for help, but because of a debt that had remained unpaid for 22 years. This is the story of how a desperate mother's love collided with a billionaire's darkest secret, and how a dog named Atlas became the bridge between two worlds that were never supposed to meet. But before we reach that frozen highway, before we understand why Emma was running and what she was running from, we need to go back to the beginning, back to a time when Emma Dawson still believed the world had a place for people like her. Emma grew up in the kind of poverty that doesn't make the news, the quiet kind, the invisible kind. Her mother, Diane, worked 3 jobs just to keep the lights on in their single-wide trailer on the outskirts of a town called Millbrook. They never had enough heat in winter or enough food at the end of the month, but Diane made sure Emma never went to school without a clean shirt. That was her line in the sand. Her children would be clean and fed, even if she had to skip meals herself. Emma learned early that love wasn't about what you had. It was about what you gave up for the people who needed you. She watched her mother sacrifice everything, every comfort, every dream, every possibility of rest, just so Emma could have a chance at something better. And she swore to herself, even as a little girl, that she would make those sacrifices mean something. She was a good student, not brilliant, but determined. She won a scholarship to community college, studied nursing, and for a brief, beautiful moment, it looked like she might actually escape the gravity of her circumstances. She met a man named Derek during her 2nd year. He was charming and confident and full of promises. He told her she was beautiful. He told her she deserved better than the life she came from. And when she got pregnant at 21, he told her they would build something wonderful together. Those were lies, of course. But Emma didn't know that yet. Derek stayed for 2 years, long enough to see Lily born, healthy, and screaming and perfect. Long enough to see the positive pregnancy test for baby number 2. And then, 6 months before Lucas arrived, Derek vanished. He didn't leave a note. He didn't say goodbye. He just woke up one morning, packed a bag, and walked out of their apartment while Emma was at work. She came home to find his side of the closet empty and a single text message on her phone. "Sorry, can't do this." 3 words. 3 words to end 3 years of promises. Emma didn't fall apart. She wanted to. God knows she wanted to. But there were 2 children now who needed her to be strong. So she took her broken heart and locked it in a box somewhere deep inside herself, and she kept moving. She finished her nursing certification while 8 months pregnant. She gave birth to Lucas on a Tuesday and went back to work on Thursday. Not because she wanted to, but because sick days didn't pay the bills and formula wasn't free. For 3 years, she held it together through sheer willpower. She worked the night shift at the county hospital so she could be home with the kids during the day. She slept in fragments, 2 hours here, 3 hours there, always listening for Lily's nightmares or Lucas's cough. She stretched every dollar until it screamed, clipping coupons, buying generic, accepting hand-me-downs with grateful humility. And somehow, impossibly, she made it work, until the day she couldn't any more. The landlord's name was Howard Beckett. He was 63 years old, overweight, and had the kind of smile that made Emma's skin crawl. He had owned the apartment building where Emma lived for 15 years, and in all that time, he had never once fixed the broken heater in Unit 4B. But he always collected rent on time, always knocked on her door at exactly 9 a.m. on the first of the month. And lately, he had started lingering. At first, it was just looks, then comments, then suggestions. He told Emma she was working too hard. He told her a pretty girl like her shouldn't have to struggle so much. He told her there were other arrangements they could make if she ever had trouble paying rent. She pretended not to understand. She pretended the implications weren't exactly what she knew they were. She just smiled politely and locked the door behind him, and tried not to think about what would happen if she ever fell behind on rent. That month, she fell behind. Lucas got sick, not just regular sick, hospital sick. A respiratory infection that turned into pneumonia, that turned into 5 days in the pediatric ICU. Emma sat beside his tiny bed and watched machines breathe for her son, and she made every kind of deal with God that a desperate mother can make. She promised to be better, work harder, give more, anything, absolutely anything, if he would just let her baby live. Lucas survived. The hospital bill did not. It arrived 3 weeks later, $18,000. Emma stared at the number until it stopped looking like a number and started looking like a death sentence. She didn't have $18,000. She didn't have $1,800. She barely had enough to make rent that month. And after the days she'd missed work sitting at Lucas's bedside, she wasn't even sure about that. She tried to set up a payment plan. The hospital told her she didn't qualify. She tried to apply for assistance programs. The waiting lists were months long. She tried to pick up extra shifts, but the hospital was cutting hours, not adding them. Every door she knocked on closed in her face. Every option she explored led to a dead end. And then Howard Beckett came knocking. "I heard about your boy," he said, standing in her doorway with that smile that made her stomach turn. That must have been scary, must have been expensive, too. Emma didn't invite him in. "We're managing." "Are you, though?" He leaned against the doorframe, casual, confident. "Because I've been doing some math, Emma. You're late this month. You've never been late before. That tells me something changed. I'll have the rent by the 15th. I promise." "The 15th." He nodded slowly. "That's a whole extra week. That's going to cost me money, you know. Interest, opportunity cost, that kind of thing." "I understand I'll pay whatever late fee—" "There are other ways to pay, Emma." His eyes moved down her body, slow and deliberate. "You're a smart girl. I'm sure we can figure something out." She felt the blood drain from her face. "No. Think about it." He pushed off the doorframe, still smiling. "I'm a patient man, but not infinitely patient. You've got until the 1st of next month. After that," he shrugged, "well, you know how these things go." He walked away, whistling. Emma closed the door and locked it, and pressed her back against the wood and slid down to the floor. Lily found her there 20 minutes later, crying silently, with her knees pulled to her chest. "Mommy?" Lily's small hand touched her cheek. "Why are you sad?" Emma wiped her eyes, forced a smile. "Just tired, baby. Mommy's just tired." But she wasn't tired. She was trapped, and she knew it. 3 weeks. She had 3 weeks to find a miracle or face the unthinkable. She picked up every extra shift. She sold everything she owned that had any value. She even swallowed her pride and asked her mother for help, even though Diane was surviving on Social Security checks that barely covered her own rent. It wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. By the last week of the month, Emma had exactly $200 to her name. Rent was $800. The hospital was threatening to send her bill to collections. And Howard Beckett had started leaving notes under her door. Just little reminders. Little threats disguised as friendly suggestions. She knew what she had to do. She had known for days, maybe weeks, but she hadn't been able to admit it to herself. Running was cowardly. Running meant giving up. Running meant admitting that the world had finally beaten her. But staying meant something worse. She packed in the middle of the night, 2 suitcases, one for her, one for the kids. She took only what they could carry: clothes, medications, photographs, the stuffed rabbit that Lucas couldn't sleep without. She left behind everything else: the furniture she'd bought second-hand, the dishes her mother had given her, the life she'd tried so hard to build. At 3 a.m. she loaded the children into her car, a 12-year-old Honda with 200,000 miles, and a heater that worked most of the time. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she had to go somewhere, anywhere, away from Howard Beckett and his smiles and his suggestions. She had heard about a shelter in Helena, 300 miles north. They took women with children. They asked no questions. It was a chance. Maybe the only chance she had left. She drove through the darkness, watching the miles click by, watching the gas gauge slowly drop. The children slept in the back seat, bundled in every blanket she owned. She played the radio low, searching for weather updates, trying to ignore the growing knot in her stomach. The storm came faster than predicted. One moment, the road was clear. The next, she was driving blind through a wall of white. Snow so thick she couldn't see the hood of her own car. Wind that shook the Honda like a toy in a giant's hand. She slowed to a crawl, gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles went white, praying for a sign, an exit, anything. The engine coughed at mile marker 47, coughed again at 48, and then with a final shudder, it died. Emma turned the key, nothing. Turned it again, nothing. She checked the gas gauge, half a tank. She checked the dashboard lights. Nothing was on that, shouldn't be. She had no idea what was wrong, and even if she did, she couldn't have fixed it in a blizzard in the dark. "Mommy?" Lily's voice was small and scared. "Why did we stop?" "Just taking a little break, sweetie." Emma kept her voice calm. "Steady. Go back to sleep." But sleep wasn't an option. Not anymore. Without the engine, there was no heat. Within minutes, the temperature inside the car began to drop. Emma pulled the blankets tighter around the children, wrapped her own coat around them, added layers until there were no more layers to add. It wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. She waited as long as she dared, waited for another car to pass, for lights in the distance, for any sign of rescue. But the road was empty, the storm had swallowed everything, and her children were getting colder by the minute. That's when Emma made the decision that would nearly kill them all. She remembered passing something a few miles back. Not a town exactly, just a cluster of buildings barely visible through the snow, a gas station maybe, or a diner, somewhere with heat and light and people who could help. It couldn't be more than 2 miles away, maybe 3 at most. She could carry the children. She could make it. She had to make it. She bundled Lucas into the front carrier she'd kept from his infancy. He was too big for it now, but it held him against her chest, kept her hands free. She held Lily's hand tight and told her they were going on an adventure, a snow adventure. They just had to walk a little way, and then they'd find a warm place with hot chocolate and blankets. Lily believed her. 3-year-old Lucas was already half asleep again, trusting completely in his mother's arms. Emma stepped out of the car and into chaos. The wind hit her like a physical blow. The snow came at her horizontally, stinging her face, filling her eyes, finding every gap in her clothing. Within seconds, she couldn't see the car behind her. Within a minute, she couldn't see anything at all. She walked anyway. What choice did she have? She followed the road by feel, keeping her feet on the asphalt, staying between the invisible lines she knew were somewhere beneath the snow. Every step was a battle. Every breath was a negotiation with frozen air that burned her lungs. She counted steps to keep herself sane. 100, 200, 300. She stopped counting at 1,000 because the numbers were getting too heavy to carry. Lily fell for the first time somewhere around the 30-minute mark. Just dropped in the snow like her legs had given up on the whole enterprise. Emma hauled her up with one arm while Lucas hung heavy from her chest. "Come on, baby. Just a little further. You can do it." "I'm cold, Mommy. I want to go back to the car." "We can't go back, sweetheart. We have to go forward." "Forward is where the warm place is." "What if there's no warm place?" The question hit Emma like a slap. She didn't have an answer, so she just picked up her daughter and kept walking with a child in each arm, her muscles screaming, her heart pounding, her mind repeating the same desperate prayer over and over. Please, please, please. Time lost all meaning. She could have been walking for an hour or a year. The world had narrowed to a tunnel of white noise and frozen pain. She couldn't feel her hands anymore. Couldn't feel her feet. Couldn't feel anything except the weight of her children and the burning in her lungs. And then her knees gave out. She went down hard, twisting at the last moment to keep Lucas from hitting the ground. Lily tumbled from her arms and landed in a snowdrift, too exhausted to even cry. Emma tried to stand. Her legs refused. She tried again, failed again. This is it, she thought. This is where it ends. She pulled the children close, wrapped herself around them as best she could. If they were going to die, at least they would die together. At least they would die warm in each other's arms. At least she could give them that. "I'm sorry," she whispered into Lucas's hair. "I'm so sorry, babies. Mommy tried so hard." Lily's small voice came from somewhere near her shoulder. "Mommy, what's that sound?" Emma listened. At first, she heard nothing but wind. Then, faintly, impossibly, she heard something else. A bark, a dog's bark, sharp and insistent, cutting through the storm like a blade. She lifted her head, squinted into the whiteout, and saw them. Two figures emerging from the chaos. One was massive and four-legged, a German shepherd with a coat like midnight, moving through the snow as if it were nothing more than tall grass. The other was a man, tall and broad-shouldered, wrapped in a thermal suit that looked like it cost more than Emma's car. The dog reached them first. He circled Emma and the children twice, barking, then pressed his warm body against hers like he was trying to transfer his own heat into her frozen limbs. The man followed seconds later, dropping to his knees beside them. "Are they breathing?" His voice was deep and urgent, barely audible over the wind. Emma tried to answer. Her lips wouldn't cooperate. Okay, I've got you. Can you stand?" She shook her head. No, she couldn't stand. She couldn't do anything anymore. "That's all right. I've got you." He gathered Lily into his arms like she weighed nothing. "Atlas, stay close. We're going home." The dog barked once in acknowledgement. The man looked at Emma. Even through the snow, even through her fading vision, she saw something in his eyes that she didn't understand. Something like recognition. Something like guilt. "Hold on to me," he said. "Don't let go. Whatever happens, don't let go." She grabbed his jacket with fingers that no longer felt like her own. He pulled her upright with his free arm and started walking, half carrying her through the storm, the dog leading the way through the whiteout. Later, Emma would remember very little of that walk, just fragments, warmth slowly returning to her fingers. Lily's small voice asking if the nice man was an angel. Lucas waking up long enough to pat the dog's head and mumble "puppy" before falling asleep again. And then lights. So many lights. A house appearing out of the darkness like a miracle, every window blazing against the storm. The man carried them through a door and into heat so sudden it felt like a physical embrace. Emma collapsed onto something soft. She heard voices, movement, people rushing around her. Someone was wrapping her in blankets. Someone else was checking the children. The dog was still there, lying across her feet like a living heating pad. She should have been grateful. She should have been relieved. Instead, she felt only confusion. Who was this man? Why had he been out in a blizzard in the middle of the night? How had he found them when no one else could? But exhaustion answered for her. Before she could ask a single question, darkness rose up and swallowed her whole. When Emma opened her eyes, she was in a bedroom, not a hospital, not a shelter. A bedroom with soft sheets and heavy curtains and a fireplace crackling in the corner. Morning light filtered through the windows, weak and gray, but undeniably morning. She had slept. Actually slept. She sat up, fast, too fast. Her head spun. The children are safe. A woman's voice came from the doorway. She was maybe 50, with silver hair and kind eyes and an apron dusted with flour. They're in the kitchen having pancakes, or rather, your daughter is having pancakes. Your son is having more fun wearing them than eating them. Emma's breath caught. They're okay? They're really okay? They're more than okay. The doctor checked them over last night. No frostbite, no hypothermia. You got them here just in time. The woman paused. You, on the other hand, had mild hypothermia in both hands and feet. You need to rest. I'm fine. Emma threw back the covers. I need to see my children. The woman didn't argue, just stepped aside and pointed down the hallway. Kitchen's at the end. But when you're done, Mr. Marcus would like to speak with you. He's in the study. Mr. Marcus. Emma filed the name away as she hurried toward the sound of her daughter's laughter. The kitchen was enormous. Professional-grade appliances, marble countertops, a breakfast nook with windows overlooking a snow-covered landscape that seemed to stretch to the horizon. Lily was sitting at a table the size of Emma's old apartment, methodically dipping pancake pieces into a pool of syrup. Lucas was in a high chair beside her, covered in sticky residue, looking more content than Emma had seen him in months. "Mommy!" Lily jumped down from her chair and ran across the room. Emma caught her, lifted her, held her so tight that Lily squeaked in protest. "Mommy, you're squishing me!" "Sorry, baby." Emma loosened her grip just slightly. "Are you okay? Are you hurt anywhere?" "I'm fine, Mommy. The nice man gave us pancakes. And his dog is named Atlas, like in my book about the maps. And he said we can stay here until the snow goes away. Isn't that nice?" "Very nice." Emma set Lily down and moved to Lucas, checking him over with practiced hands. No fever, no cough, just syrup in his hair and a smile on his face. "Who's this nice man, sweetie? Did he tell you his name?" "He said his name is Gabriel." Lily returned to her pancakes. "Like the angel. I told him maybe he is an angel because he saved us from the snow. He laughed, but I think he was a little sad, too." "Why would an angel be sad, Mommy?" Emma didn't have an answer, but she intended to find out. After making sure the children were in good hands with the kind woman, whose name was apparently Margaret, Emma made her way to the study. It wasn't hard to find. The house was enormous, yes, but clearly designed, every room flowing logically into the next. She passed paintings that looked like they belonged in museums, furniture that looked like it cost more than houses, and a whole lot of empty space that suggested whoever lived here did so largely alone. The study door was open. She knocked anyway. "Come in." She stepped inside and got her first clear look at the man who had saved her life. He was younger than she'd expected, mid-30s maybe, with dark hair going slightly gray at the temples and eyes the color of winter ice. He was sitting behind a desk covered in papers, but he stood when she entered, and she realized just how tall he was, how broad, how present. Atlas was lying at his feet. The dog lifted his head when Emma entered, tail thumping once against the hardwood floor before he settled back down. "Please." The man gestured to a chair. "Sit. How are you feeling?" "Confused." Emma sat but stayed on the edge of the seat. "Grateful. Very grateful. But mostly confused." "That's understandable." He returned to his own chair but didn't relax into it. He was watching her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "What were you doing out there, Emma? In a blizzard, in the middle of the night, with 2 small children?" She stiffened. "How do you know my name?" "Your driver's license. It was in your pocket." He said it matter-of-factly, but something flickered in his eyes. "The car has been towed to my garage. It should be fixed by tomorrow." "I didn't ask for it." "I know you didn't, but you need it, and I can provide it. That's reason enough." She didn't know what to say to that. So she went back to his question. "We were driving to Helena. There's a shelter there. I heard they take women with children." "A shelter?" His voice was carefully neutral. "Why do you need a shelter, Emma?" "Why is that any of your business?" "Because you nearly died on my property. Because your children nearly died. And because I'd like to understand what circumstances led a clearly capable woman to make such a desperate choice." The word hit her like a blow. Desperate. She had been called a lot of things in her life. Poor, unlucky, struggling, but never desperate, never that. "I'm not desperate," she said. "I'm surviving. There's a difference." "Is there?" He leaned forward, elbows on the desk. "Tell me the difference, Emma. Tell me about the life you're surviving." She should have told him to mind his own business, should have taken her children and walked out into whatever was left of the storm. But something about the way he was looking at her, something about the pain hidden behind those icy eyes, made her pause. "I'm a nurse," she said finally, "or I was. I've been working night shifts at a county hospital for 3 years. Single mother, 2 kids, all the usual struggles. Last month my son got sick. Hospital bills piled up. I fell behind on rent. My landlord—" She stopped, swallowed. "My landlord made it clear there were ways I could pay other than money. I chose to leave instead. The temperature in the room seemed to drop." "This landlord, does he have a name?" "Howard Beckett. But it doesn't matter. I'm not going back there. I just need to get to Helena, find the shelter, find a job, start over." Start over. He repeated the words like they were foreign concepts. "You make it sound simple." "It's not simple, but it's what I have to do." He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Softer, sadder. "What if you didn't have to do it alone?" Emma felt her defenses rise. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if someone wanted to help you, not because they wanted something in return, not because they expected anything from you, just because they could? Would you let them?" "Why would anyone do that?" "Because once, a very long time ago, someone did that for me, and I've been trying to pay it forward ever since." She stared at him. "Who are you?" "My name is Gabriel Marcus. I'm the CEO of Marcus Technologies. And 22 years ago, when I was 12 years old and living in a car with my mother, a woman I had never met gave us everything she had so we wouldn't freeze to death." Emma's breath caught. "What?" He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a photograph, slid it across the desk toward her. Emma picked it up. The image was old, faded, clearly taken with an inexpensive camera. It showed a woman in her 30s, thin and worn, but smiling, standing in front of a modest trailer with a little girl at her side. The woman was her mother, and the little girl was Emma. "I don't understand," Emma whispered. "How—" "Your mother's name was Diane Dawson. In the winter of 2003, she was working at a diner in Millbrook. A woman came in one night with a 12-year-old boy. They were clearly struggling. The woman ordered one coffee and tried to make it last for hours. Diane noticed. She noticed because she knew what struggling looked like." He paused. His voice had grown thick. "She gave us her tips, all of them. She told us there was a church down the road that was collecting winter coats. She told us about a motel that sometimes let people stay for free if they were in trouble. She gave us directions to both, and then she gave us something else." He reached back into the drawer. This time, he pulled out a small brass key. "She gave my mother the key to her trailer, told us we could sleep there for the night. She'd sleep at a friend's house," she said, "but we needed warmth more than she did." Emma couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. "We stayed for one night, just one night. But for a 12-year-old boy who hadn't slept in a real bed in 6 months, it felt like salvation. I never forgot it. I never forgot her. And I swore that someday, somehow, I would find a way to repay the debt. But—" Emma's voice cracked. But my mother never said anything. She never mentioned. She probably didn't think it was important. People like your mother, they don't keep track of their kindnesses. They just give and give and give until there's nothing left. He met her eyes. But I kept track. I hired private investigators, searched public records, did everything I could to find the woman who saved my life. It took 15 years. By the time I found her, she was living in a nursing home with advanced dementia. I made sure she had the best care money could buy. I made sure she wanted for nothing, but I never got to thank her. Not really. Not while she still remembered what she'd done. Emma's hand flew to her mouth. The nursing home, the private room, the specialists. I thought they told me it was covered by insurance. They said there was a program. There was no program. There was only me, trying to repay a debt that can never truly be repaid. Tears were streaming down Emma's face now. She didn't bother to wipe them away. Why didn't you tell me? I wanted to. God knows I wanted to, but I didn't know how. And then... He gestured vaguely around him. Life happened. The company grew. Responsibilities multiplied. I lost track of you. Until last night. Last night? I was up late, working. Atlas was restless. He kept going to the window, whining, scratching at the door. I thought there was an animal outside. Turned out there was. 3 of them. He smiled for the first time since she'd walked in. It transformed his face, made him look younger, softer. He led me right to you. I don't know how. It was below zero, visibility was less than 10 feet, and I had no idea anyone was even out there. But Atlas knew. And he wouldn't give up until I followed. Emma looked at the dog. Atlas looked back at her with eyes that seemed far too intelligent for a simple animal. "Why are you telling me all this?" she asked. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing." Gabriel's smile faded. "But I want to offer you something." He slid a folder across the desk. Emma opened it with trembling hands. Inside were documents, contracts, paperwork that made no sense at first glance. And then slowly, terribly, wonderfully, she began to understand. "This is a job offer," she said, "for the Marcus Technologies Health Clinic. We employ over 10,000 people at our main campus. They need nurses, good nurses. Nurses who understand what it means to struggle and survive. The salary is competitive. The benefits are excellent. Housing assistance is included for the first year. And this?" She held up a separate document. "This is a lease. There's a cottage on the edge of the property. It's been empty for years. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a yard for the children to play in. It's yours if you want it, rent-free until you're back on your feet." Emma shook her head. "I can't accept this. It's too much." "It's not nearly enough." Gabriel's voice broke slightly. "Your mother gave my mother one night of warmth and safety. One night that changed everything. That one night gave us the strength to keep going, gave us hope when we had none. Without that night, there is no Marcus Technologies. There is no billion-dollar company. There is only a woman and her son frozen to death in a car somewhere." He stood up and came around the desk, knelt in front of her so they were eye to eye. "Let me do this, Emma, not because you need it. Not because I pity you, but because your mother gave me the one thing that money can't buy, and I've spent 22 years looking for a way to give it back." "What thing is that?" "Hope." He reached out and took her hand. "Let me give you hope. Let me do for you what your mother did for me. And maybe someday you'll pass it on to someone else, and the chain will continue, and your mother's kindness will echo through generations she never got to meet." Emma looked at the documents in her lap, at the dog lying peacefully at her feet, at the man kneeling before her with tears in his eyes, and for the first time in months, maybe years, she felt something crack inside her chest, something hard and cold that she had built to protect herself. It cracked, and through the cracks poured light. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." Gabriel closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were clear. "Thank you." "For what?" "For letting me pay my debt. You have no idea how long I've waited for this moment." There was a sound at the door. Emma turned to find Lily standing there, syrup still on her cheeks, looking between the two adults with wide eyes. "Mommy? Why are you crying? Why is the angel crying?" Emma laughed through her tears. "We're not crying, baby. We're just happy." "Oh." Lily thought about this. "Can I be happy too?" "Yes, sweetheart, yes you can." She held out her arms, and Lily ran into them. And for a long moment in a stranger's house in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by snow and silence, Emma Dawson held her daughter and let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, the world wasn't as cruel as she had thought. The story could have ended there, should have ended there, perhaps. But life is rarely that simple, and redemption is rarely that clean. 3 days later, when the storm had passed and the roads had cleared, Emma drove back to Millbrook, not to stay, never to stay, but to face the man she had run from, to close that chapter for good. Gabriel wanted to come with her. She refused. This was something she needed to do alone, but she didn't go entirely alone. Atlas sat in the passenger seat, his presence a comfort and a reminder that she was no longer fighting the world by herself. Howard Beckett was in his office when she arrived. He looked up when she walked in, and for a moment something like fear flickered across his face. Then it was gone, replaced by that familiar, oily smile. "Well, well, the runaway returns. Change your mind about our little arrangement?" "I came to tell you I'm not afraid of you any more," he laughed. "That's so? And what exactly are you going to do? Call the cops? Tell them what? That I offered to help a struggling single mother? I'm going to tell them everything, every comment you made, every threat you implied, every woman in this building you've done this to, because I know I'm not the only one." The smile faltered. "Who's going to believe you?" "Everyone." She dropped a folder on his desk. "Because I've spent the last 3 days collecting statements. 12 women, Howard, 12 women who were too scared to speak up. Until now." His face went pale. "You can't." "I already did. The complaint has been filed. The investigation will begin next week. And if you try to retaliate against any of them, against any of us, you'll answer to the legal team at Marcus Technologies." "Marcus Techno—" He stopped. His eyes went wide. "You're bluffing." "Call their main office and find out." She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "One more thing. My mother used to say that what goes around comes around. She believed that kindness would always find its way back, but she also believed the same was true for cruelty." She met his eyes. "Your cruelty is coming home, Howard. I hope you're ready." She walked out without looking back. Atlas walked beside her, head high, tail wagging. It took 6 months for the investigation to conclude. By then, Howard Beckett had been charged with multiple counts of harassment and coercion. He lost the building, lost his business, lost everything he had built on the backs of vulnerable women. But Emma wasn't there to see it. She was in Montana, in her cottage with the red door, watching her children play in a yard covered with spring flowers. She was working at the clinic, helping patients who reminded her of who she used to be. She was building a life, not surviving anymore, truly living. And every Sunday she and the children walked up the hill to the big house, where Gabriel and Atlas were always waiting with pancakes and laughter, and the kind of family that has nothing to do with blood and everything to do with choice. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Emma sat on the porch with Gabriel. The children were inside watching a movie with Margaret. Atlas was stretched out between them, occasionally twitching in his dreams. "I've been thinking about my mother," Emma said, "about that night she helped you." "What about it?" "She was barely surviving herself. She had nothing to spare. But she gave anyway. She gave everything she could." Emma shook her head. "I used to think that was foolish. Now I understand." "Understand what?" "That giving when you have nothing is the purest kind of giving, because it costs something. It means something. It changes things." She turned to look at him. "You didn't just save my life, Gabriel. You showed me what my mother taught me and I had forgotten." "What's that?" that we're not meant to survive alone, that asking for help isn't weakness, that the kindness we show others isn't lost. It echoes. It travels. It finds its way to people we'll never meet in ways we'll never understand. Gabriel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "She saved my life, you know, your mother, not just that one night. Every time I wanted to give up, every time the world seemed too hard, I remembered that woman in the diner. I remembered that someone believed I was worth helping, worth saving." He looked at Emma. "Now I get to believe that about you, about your children, about everyone who walks through those clinic doors." "The chain continues," Emma said softly. "The chain continues." Atlas stirred between them, lifted his head, and licked both their hands as if offering his own blessing. Then he settled back down with a contented sigh. Inside the house, Lily's laughter rang out like bells. Lucas shouted something about monsters and heroes. Margaret's voice rose and fell in the rhythms of storytelling. And outside, under a sky full of stars, two people who had once been strangers sat in comfortable silence, bound together by a debt that had transformed into a gift, by a blizzard that had become a blessing, by a simple act of kindness that had echoed across 22 years to save 3 lives on a frozen highway. That night, Emma wrote a letter she would never send. It was addressed to her mother, who had been gone for 2 years now, whose mind had faded before Emma ever got to say goodbye. "Dear Mom," she wrote, I finally understand why you gave away your tips when we barely had enough to eat, why you let strangers sleep in our home, why you never kept track of the kindnesses you showed. It wasn't foolishness. It was faith. Faith that somehow, somewhere, the good you put into the world would find its way back. I'd lost that faith for a while. The world took it from me, piece by piece, until I had nothing left but fear. But it came back, Mom. In the middle of a blizzard, on the worst night of my life, it came back. A man I had never met walked into the storm to save me, and he did it because of you. Because of one night, one act of kindness, that you probably forgot by the next morning. You saved him, Mom. And because you saved him, he saved me. And because he saved me, I'll save someone else. The chain continues. It will always continue. Because of you. I love you. I miss you. And I finally understand. Nah. She folded the letter and placed it in a box with her mother's photograph. Then she turned off the light and climbed the stairs to the room where her children slept. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new struggles, new opportunities to choose kindness over cruelty, hope over fear. But tonight, in this warm house filled with people who had chosen to love each other, Emma Dawson closed her eyes and slept without dreaming. And somewhere in the darkness, Atlas lifted his head and listened to the silence. All was well. The months that followed were not without their challenges. Emma learned that healing was not a destination, but a journey, that trauma did not simply disappear because circumstances improved. There were nights when she woke in a cold sweat, certain she was back in that blizzard, certain her children were freezing in her arms. There were days when the old fears crept back, whispering that she didn't deserve this life, that it would all be taken away as quickly as it had been given. But she was no longer alone. And that made all the difference. Gabriel became something she hadn't expected. A friend. Not a savior, not a benefactor, but a genuine friend who understood what it meant to climb out of darkness. They talked for hours about their childhoods, about their mothers, about the strange parallel paths that had brought them together. He told her about the years after that night in the trailer, how his mother had found work, how they had slowly rebuilt their lives, how he had channeled every ounce of his survivor's energy into building something meaningful. I always thought success would feel like arrival, he admitted one evening, like reaching a destination. Instead, it feels like owing. Like every dollar I earn is borrowed from the universe, and I'll spend my life trying to pay it back. Maybe that's exactly how it should be, Emma said. Maybe the owing is the point. Lily and Lucas thrived in ways that broke Emma's heart with joy. Lily, who had been so quiet and careful in their old apartment, blossomed into a fearless explorer, dragging Atlas on adventures through the property, building forts in the meadow, declaring herself queen of every hill she climbed. Lucas, who had spent his first years in and out of hospitals, grew stronger every day, his laughter ringing through the cottage like music. They called Gabriel Uncle Gabriel. He pretended to be embarrassed by this. He wasn't. A year after the blizzard, Emma received a letter from the Millbrook District Attorney's Office. Howard Beckett had been sentenced to 4 years in prison. The 12 women who had testified against him had received a formal apology from the city and a settlement from his seized assets. Justice, imperfect and late but real, had finally been served. Emma read the letter twice. Then she put it in the same box with her mother's photograph and the letter she would never send. Some chapters needed to be closed quietly, privately, without fanfare, but she did allow herself one small celebration. That night she made pancakes for dinner, Lily's suggestion, and they ate them by candlelight, all 5 of them crowded around the small table in the cottage kitchen. Emma, Lily, Lucas, Gabriel, and Margaret, who had somehow become family without anyone officially declaring it so. Atlas lay under the table, catching the pieces of pancake that Lucas accidentally dropped. "To second chances," Gabriel said, raising his glass of orange juice. "To second chances," the others echoed. Lily raised her own small cup. "And to Atlas, because he found us in the snow." The dog's tail thumped against the floor in agreement. Later, when the children were asleep and the candles had burned low, Emma stepped onto the porch and looked up at the stars. They were different here than they had been in Millbrook. Brighter, closer, more numerous. Like the universe itself had expanded to make room for possibility. She heard the door open behind her. Gabriel joined her at the railing, his breath forming small clouds in the cold air. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Anything. Do you believe in fate? In things happening for a reason?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I used to believe in randomness, in chaos, the universe as a slot machine that occasionally paid out, but mostly took. That's how it felt, growing up the way I did. And now? Now I believe in connections, not fate exactly, but threads, invisible lines between people that get woven over time, pulling us toward each other, toward moments that matter." He looked at her. "Your mother pulled on a thread 22 years ago. She didn't know it. She just gave what she had. But that thread connected her to me to you, and you to your children, and all of us to everyone we'll ever help or heal." "The chain," Emma said. "The chain." She nodded slowly. "I think I'm starting to believe that too." They stood in silence, watching their breath mingle with the cold air, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Atlas, still inside, answered with a single sharp bark. "Thank you," Emma said finally. "For what?" "For looking. For 22 years of looking for a woman you owed one night to. Most people would have let that debt go, would have convinced themselves it didn't matter. It was the only thing that mattered." Gabriel's voice was soft. "When you grow up with nothing, you remember every kindness, every single one. They become the architecture of who you are." He turned to face her fully. In the starlight, his eyes were unreadable. "Your mother built something in me that night, Emma. She didn't know she was doing it, but she built a foundation. And everything I've become, everything I've achieved, stands on that foundation, on a diner waitress who gave away her tips and offered a stranger the key to her home." Emma felt tears prick her eyes. She would have been so proud if she could have seen what you became. She would have been proud of you. Gabriel reached out and took her hand. "You're her legacy, Emma, not me. You're the one who inherited her spirit, her courage, her refusal to let the world make her hard. I almost did become hard, after Derek, after Howard, after everything. Almost, but you didn't. That's what matters." She squeezed his hand once, then let go. I should get some sleep. Early shift tomorrow. Right? He stepped back, suddenly formal. Good night, Emma. Good night, Gabriel. She was halfway to the door when she stopped, turned back. Gabriel? Yes? I'm glad you didn't give up. Glad you kept looking for 22 years. Glad that thread led you to me and my children on the worst night of our lives. He smiled. That same transformative smile she had seen on their first morning in his study. So am I. She went inside, and for the first time since she could remember, Emma Dawson looked forward to tomorrow. Not because tomorrow would be easy, but because she knew she wouldn't face it alone. The chain continued. And she was part of it now. Not just a link, but a link that would forge new links, that would reach people she hadn't yet met, that would echo forward through time in ways she couldn't imagine. Her mother had given away tips to strangers. Emma would give something too. Not money, she still had little of that, but kindness, patience, hope. The same gifts her mother had given, passed down through generations, multiplying with each exchange. That was the true inheritance. That was the real treasure. And on a cold Montana night, in a cottage she never expected to call home, Emma Dawson finally understood that she was rich beyond measure. Because love, true love, the kind that asks for nothing and gives everything, that love was the only currency that mattered, and she had more of it than she had ever realized. The snow fell gently outside, covering the world in white silence. Inside, her children slept peacefully. A dog named Atlas dreamed of storms he had braved and people he had saved. And somewhere in the big house on the hill, a man who had spent 22 years searching for a way to say thank you finally felt something settle in his chest. Not peace, exactly, not closure, but something like completion, something like coming home. The blizzard had been the ending of one story, but it was also the beginning of another. And that story, the story of Emma and Gabriel and two small children and a dog who could find lost souls in the snow, that story was only just beginning.